Julie Tighe is the president of arguably the most important and effective environmental organization in New York. You like that, Julie? Of the New York League of Conservation Voters and the New York League of Conservation Voters Education Fund. And in case you wonder what those are, one is the not-for-profit, and one is the PAC, I suppose we could say, or, well. I can explain. Okay, you'll explain, okay. Julie helped make it this reputation. I know because I've been on the board of directors for 29 years. So I have lived under several presidents, so I speak with authority. Coming from being on the DC's chief of staff, and before that, the Assistant Commissioner of Intergovernmental and Legislative Affairs for the state, Julie has an amazing rapport and great relationships with all the movers and shakers in the state, including the elected officials. And she's often called upon for her depth of knowledge and experience and insights and golfing. The topic she'll be speaking on today is probably one of the most important for the future of the state. And there's no one else who could speak on CLCPA and green energy in the state. And I know that she has been on the governor's back for the past couple of months, and the governor listens to Julie, I hope. With that, Julie, please. Kick it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for that. Yes, I'm Julie Tighe. New York League of Conservation Voters is the policy and advocacy arm of our family of organizations, and we have an education fund, and that job is really to make sure we're educating, engaging, and empowering New Yorkers to be effective advocates for the environment. So we often say with NYLCV that we're electing for the environment. And we have a suite of PACs that also helps to support candidates or to work against candidates who are bad on the environment, as may the case be. And we think that this whole family of organizations really helps us to be powerful in the work that we do and in getting New Yorkers out there and engaged on environmental issues. And certainly, I often say the number one thing that we can do as individuals to act on climate change is to vote, because there's only so much that we can do individually. We need institutional change, and that means we need leaders who understand that and prioritize that. And we're very fortunate to have so many leaders like that here in the room today. Thank you, Anna. I know Mr. Sturpey was here earlier, and Senator May still be back there. And we saw Assemblyman Magnarelli yesterday. So really have a great group of people here in Central New York who are fighting for this, as well as the mayor. So I'm delighted to be here to talk a bit about New York's Climate Act and what comes next for building a cleaner, more affordable, more reliable energy system in New York. Really, thank you to Rhea, first, as you pointed out, for being a board member for so many decades and for quite a while. She was our sole anchor here in Central New York. We have been expanding to have a chapter up here. Always working on that, so if you're interested, please let me know. And I think especially for bringing together so many leaders, advocates, and innovators for these discussions, which are so important for what are we going to do with Energy Future, and that you've been doing it for 22 years is quite amazing. So really happy to be here today. I think this year's symposium is at an especially crucial moment because this is not just about climate policy, right? There's a lot of discussion about affordability. Earlier in the discussion, there was a question about misinformation. There's a lot of people who are trying to blame the climate law for the cost of energy. Not true. I'll get to that in a minute. But it's also about clean air and better health. It's about economic competitiveness. It's about the jobs of the future. And it's about whether or not New York chooses to lead in difficult times. because we are literally, I have missed some of the things this morning because I did speak to the governor's office about what's happening with the climate law today, and then I had to have a call with some of my other colleagues to see what are we going to do and how are we going to respond, because there may need to be some adjustments to make things more workable, but we have a really solid foundation of what we had. And I'm going to come to something that Shanak, who seems to have left now, brought up in his idea, but a year ago, New York showed the country what's possible when the government commits to doing big things and follows through, right? Shanak talked about how traffic congestion in New York City is so bad and what it's impacting communities, especially in the Bronx. And after years of planning and debates in Albany, environmental reviews, infrastructure investments, and relentless opposition, the nation's first congestion pricing program finally became a reality in New York City. Right? And yes, thank you. And what have we seen with that? 10% less traffic, faster commutes, 15 minutes on average, safer streets, cleaner air, even less noise. Honking complaints are down 17%, and I can tell you that was not something that we were expecting as advocates to be a benefit. It's been a side benefit, right? And really important, the economic activity in that area, which is south of 60th Street in Manhattan, is up. It's not down, although Donald Trump tried to say, he's like, the streets are empty. It's like, what are you talking about? Your car just isn't stuck in traffic all the time, right? Traffic has not spilled into adjacent neighborhoods, like the way critics had warned it would, nor has there pollution. In fact, benefits are being felt throughout the entire 5 boroughs, even across the Hudson in New Jersey and out on Long Island. That success did not happen by accident. It reflects the steadfast leadership from Governor Hochul, with a small pause in between, and the state legislature, and from advocates and communities who refuse to give up. And you might be wondering why, here in central New York, I'm talking about congestion pricing so much. But with this implementation of congestion pricing, New York proved something fundamental. When we lead with vision and persistence, we can deliver real, measurable results to make people's lives better, right? And as someone who lives in the congestion zone, as they call it, right? Like, traffic is measurably better than it was before. And that is makes a huge difference in people's lives. Now we need that same kind of leadership, that same vision and persistence on climate policy and clean energy. Today, we're facing a different but equally urgent challenge. New Yorkers are feeling the pressure of rising energy demand and rising costs. At the same time, the federal government is stepping back from clean energy leadership right when we need it the most to stabilize prices and protect families. So the question before us is simple. Will New York step up again? Will we bring that same bold leadership to transforming our energy system? Because the truth is, our current system is not working for consumers. The fossil fuel roller coaster that we're on is the source of rising costs. Data from New York's grid operator tells us that unpredictable and highly variable natural gas prices are one of the biggest drivers of electricity prices in the state. And because gas-fired power plants often set the price of electricity, when gas goes up, electricity prices go up with them. Wholesale electric prices have nearly doubled from 2024 to 2025, which tracks closely with rising gas prices. And that's obviously, we're going to see that trend again for 2026. When we see this cycle every winter, cold weather increases demand for heating, gas prices spike, electricity prices follow. The same thing happens during a heat wave in the summertime. And we know that making matters worse is that gas prices aren't only impacted by the demand on the grid. Right now, the war in Iran is pushing oil prices through the roof. We've seen swings of more than 40% in just weeks. People paid $250 more for heating oil this March versus last year. That is real money. That's my cable bill, which is an outrageous amount of money in itself, but that's a whole nother bill that you weren't planning on, and most of the time you're not getting that much of an increase in your salary from year to year. We saw this happen not that long ago when Russia invaded Ukraine. We'll continue to ride this roller coaster wherever geopolitical shocks hit energy prices and make them soar. And we see this every time there's a blip in the system, right? There's a storm, it knocks out some of the stations, that drives the prices up. So this is not sustainable. It's not predictable, and it's not controllable. Like, the state of New York has no control over this. The Washington folks do not have control of this. This is all set. Like, Donald Trump does not have control over the price of energy, as we have seen, right? This is set on a global market, and New Yorkers are paying the price. That's the system we're operating in today. So, being honest here, weakening the Climate Act is not going to lower utility bills, right? It's not what's currently driving your costs up. It will deepen our exposure to exactly the kind of volatility that's driving up costs in the first place. Right now, we spend more than $44 billion every year on fossil fuels in New York. That's $44 billion that's leaving our economy, $44 billion that's being sent out of state instead of investing it right here in New York, creating jobs, building clean energy infrastructure that lowers long-term price for families. It's not being invested in heat pumps that help you get more stable energy, or thermal networks or geothermal, making our buildings more efficient. From large-scale renewables to the transmission to deliver it, it's not putting any of those dollars into those systems. It's sending money to Texas and Oklahoma and other states. We are not keeping those dollars in New York. And fossil fuels are not just a climate problem, they're an affordability problem. The good news is that we already know what the solution is. Clean energy is now the fastest and least expensive way to add power to the grid. 90% of the energy that's being built across the United States is renewables, right? That's just not New York, where we have a climate law. This is across the entire country because it is fastest and cheapest. And we know this. And they're doing it more in Texas than we are doing it here. So last year, we saw during the summer's heat wave, distributed solar, that's that rooftop solar and community solar that we heard about, helped keep the lights on during when the grid was under most stress, saving New Yorkers nearly $100 million in a single day, right? That's real money, keeping our energy prices down. During a recent cold snap, offshore wind delivered reliable energy when we needed it. South Fork Wind, this country's first at-scale offshore wind project, performed on par with the most efficient gas plants out there, right? And it is delivering. Last year, it worked 362 days of the year, and at least one of those days, they weren't working, not because there wasn't wind, but because there was a problem with the transmission. Not their fault. So the good news is we have the solutions, right? Large-scale solar and wind projects, offshore wind, rooftop and community solar, thermal energy networks, battery storage systems, all of these things are working together to help us deliver, can help reduce demand and deliver power when it's needed the most. And of course, the transmission and distribution systems to move the electrons there. And our climate law calls for all those things and provides support for that. Because we need transmission regardless of what the electrons are coming from, and we're gonna have to pay for it. I hate to say that. We're trying to get more funds from not ratepayers to help to pay for that with a cap and invest program. And that's what we're hoping to get out of the changes that the governor's pursuing right now in the law. And we need to scale this success. And that's one of the ways that we're gonna help pay for it and deliver on the energy efficiency and transition opportunities that we have to deliver for New Yorkers. Like, we have to take a hard look at all the things we're doing, right? And how we pay for, how we plan, and how we procure clean energy. We need the right incentives, and we need major investments in energy efficiency. We know that. And it can't all come from ratepayers. We need the infrastructure and the programs that ensure power is reliably and fairly priced. Offshore wind must remain a cornerstone of New York's energy future. South Fork Wind has shown us what's possible, and I think we heard from Jen earlier, right? There's 2 new projects that are gonna deliver enough energy for more than 1.1 million homes. That is a lot of energy, and we know that those are gonna deliver. And the governor has successfully defended these projects in face of a hostile federal government, and her actions are going to pay dividends for the industry. We heard from the Long Island Power Authority, they wish they were already on. It would have helped save ratepayers a lot of money during the cold winter that we just had. let's talk about solar. I think Marguerite sort of stole my line here, but last night Rhea talked about how I think it was her first symposium, maybe, or maybe it was one of the first, right? Someone brought a solar panel, and attendees had never seen one before. And today, New York is #1 in community solar in the nation, right? That's right. That's leadership that's delivering real benefits for the people who have the rooftop on their own solar, dramatically cutting how much money they're paying on energy, but for the grid in their neighborhood too, because it's helped reducing that pressure overall. So we need to be doubling down on that. And we want to be helping to implement the climate law by doubling our distributed solar goals to 20 gigawatts because we met our goal and we met it early on solar. We want to create durable, long-term incentives. We want to automate the permitting process so homeowners and small businesses can cut through the red tape and get projects built. Because when you're spending more money on soft costs than you are on the infrastructure for a solar panel on your roof, that's a problem. We know that this transition works best when we can all be a part of it. And we heard a lot earlier from folks about the value of battery storage and how that helps to grab onto that extra clean energy when it's being deployed, grab on that extra clean energy when it's being generated and not being used, and deploy it when the demand is highest, when we need it the most, right? That helps us to level out the grid. Yes, school buses can be part of that solution too. It gives us an opportunity to finally retire dirty, really expensive peaker plants that are not only incredibly expensive to operate, they disproportionately impact low-income communities and communities of color. We also need to be clear-eyed about rising demand. A long time, we've had our economy grow, and we haven't really had to build that more energy because we've had so much efficiency happening with the things that we're doing, right? Think about it when we all used to have incandescent light bulbs, and now nobody has incandescent light bulbs because they're really wasteful. And we've made a lot of other changes like that to make our world much more efficient. And I think David reminded us in his remarks about how folks are plugging so many more things in than you did when I was a kid, right? Back when we used to, play outside. I know. And I didn't have a phone or a beeper, right? And beepers use batteries, right? There's a whole rap songs about that. But look, obviously, we're part of it, but more at scale, like data centers and AI and other large energy users are coming online really rapidly. And they have to be part of the solution, right? Not just new sources of strain on the grid. So that means they should be contributing to clean energy investments and contributing to grid stability and flexibility and trying to build that into how we do our business. We have to get this right. That is essential because how we power this growth will determine what New Yorkers pay for decades to come. And of course, I haven't even spoke very, very much about all the other pieces, right? It's we have so many segments under our climate law, right? We're dealing with the power sector, right? We're dealing with the building sector, which is really challenging because we're an old state with old infrastructure. I mean, my house, when I had a house in Albany, was built in 1853, right? Not terribly efficient. I remember we did some work when there was a hurricane, I think it was Irene, and we went to, I guess, the Mohawk Valley, and people had, for insulation, newspaper. We were cleaning out their houses, and they had newspaper in their walls. That's what people used back in the day for insulation. We had a lot of work to do on that. We need to deal with transportation, right? I have an EV, and I'm looking at that $6 gas in my neighborhood, and I'm laughing because I'm it was $8 for me to fill my tank up with energy. So we have a lot of work that we have to do a lot of places, and we have the parameters that we need, right? There's no one silver bullet. We wish that there was. If there was some magic that we could just poof and easily we made all these transitions, we would be doing that. But there's not. It's going to take a lot of things. It's going to take a cap and invest program. It's going to take us actually building the infrastructure, right? We sometimes spend so much energy on new policy and not enough time on implementing the policies we have, right? We have the policies we need for clean energy. We need to help deliver on them, and if there's problems where policy is in the way, then we need to go out and fix them. We have great champions who can help us with that, but we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I heard that said earlier today, too. So I want to leave everybody here with this final message, right? Investing in clean energy is not a financial burden. Investing in clean energy is how we deliver long-term cost control. I know how much it's going to cost to get energy from South Fork Wind in 20 years because they have one price. Fossil fuels, I can't tell you what's going to cost tomorrow, right? Because it's on a totally different market and we don't have control over that. So think about that. Think about how much easier it is for businesses to be planning if they know 20 years from now, energy is going to cost, they know what it's going to cost in 20 years. It allows for much more practical things. So we must make these investments now so New Yorkers are not exposed to these volatile fossil fuel prices for decades to come. This is about stability, predictability, and protecting New York families. The choice before New York is not so complicated. We can stay on our current path, dependent on fossil fuels, exposed to this global volatility, sending billions out of our economy every year. And I know New York's got a big economy, but $44 billion feels like we could do something better with it. Or we can lead. We can build a modern energy system that is cleaner, more reliable, more affordable. We can create jobs here at home. We can stabilize prices. We can improve and protect public health. The governor and the legislature delivered congestion pricing through persistence, leadership, and a commitment to getting big things done. New York has never been a state that shies away from big challenges. As Jay said before, when New York does it, everybody does it. We take on these challenges and we lead. And when we do, the country follows. So I know, Anna, you're the one who actually said it. I made a note about this, that we're not trying to do things perfect. We don't have to be perfect. We have to be better, right? And we got to keep that in mind. And I know that we're going to do this. I know we're going to deliver, and it's going to be a little bumpy sometimes, but we're going to get there in the end, and we're going to take control of our economy and really deliver on what New Yorkers need. We have the Climate Act as our blueprint, as our guiding star. Now we need to deliver on it. So thank you very much.